Hi, I'm Kelly.
And hi, I'm Marianne, and you're listening to The Girlfriend God.
And welcome to the Girlfriend God podcast. We're super excited to post our first interview episode. So today, my goddess-loving friends, we welcome Dr. Carla Ionescu to the show. Carla is a doctor of ancient studies and civilizations, a part-time professor, a full-time adventurer and storyteller, and one of the world's leading experts on Artemis. She's the founder and CEO of the Artemis Research Center, the author of She Who Hunts, Artemis, the Goddess Who Changed the World, and the creator of the Goddess Project podcast. You can find Carla and her podcast on social media channels. Just search for the Goddess Project podcast or Artemis Expert. Did I forget anything, Carla?
That was fantastic. That was fan. When you say it like that, I'm like, oh, I did do all those things.
I hear you.
That was great.
So let's get right to it. Tell us about the first time you encountered Artemis, and you know what our podcast is about. So we don't mean the facts, research, detailed answer. We want the gory details of your emotional experience.
Well, I think it was an emotional. So I was trying to think back on that question when I first saw it, because when I was doing my undergrad, I met my mentor, let's say, in religious studies. His name is Professor Barry Wilson. And he was really, really wonderful, like such a great mentor, such a great human. He is, sorry, I don't want to say he was, he still is, but he's retired now. And I took one of his religious studies courses just sort of for curiosity, and then we got talking. I can't remember exactly how we got talking about goddesses, and we're talking about the Christian religion, and so it was a Judeo-Christian class. And I had said to him that Artemis was a goddess that I had thought about, and sort of she kind of pops up in my life here and there, like literally pops up. Like I will go somewhere and there'll be an image of her, or I will read something and there'll be an image of her. And just as a little side note, today he's putting together a course for like senior citizens, and he goes, I'm writing about this guy that was writing in Ephesus, and he sent me the cover of the book, and it's Artemis, the huntress, on the cover of the book. And so this happens to me a lot. Like this, she is in my life in a way that I can't explain. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure what she wants from me. Like for a long time, I was like, what do you want from me? What do I do with this? I didn't know. And so I wanted to do my master's degree because I wanted to start looking more into her work and things like that. And then into her traditions. And then for your PhD, you have to do something that no one has looked at before. It has to be something very tiny. And you can imagine in the Greco-Roman world, everyone's done everything. So I looked at her, especially in Ephesus, and I realized that no one had looked at her since like the 1940s, and I thought maybe that's what she's trying to tell me. She keeps popping up in my life, especially the Artemis of Ephesus. I don't know if you ever saw her statue with the bulbous coat, that kind of looks like beehives or bulls or whatever. And she would just come haunting me all the time. She'd just show up everywhere I would go. And I don't know if you followed my Instagram, but you saw that I went to New Jersey, Hudson County in New York State. And my cousin took me to, I can't remember the name of the town now. Sorry, New York. But she took me to a bar and she's like, oh, there's this really great graffiti of Artemis, right? And I thought, oh, cool, let me see it, because I thought, oh, people did the huntress or something, it's graffiti. And I don't know if you saw the picture on Instagram, but it's Artemis of Ephesus on this massive scale. I literally, like, my mouth was open. I was like, she still wants something from me. I have not fulfilled whatever it is that she wants from me. So I really became, I guess, I don't know. I always say I became obsessed, but in a way I had no choice. She followed me around and she wants something. And actually just recently, I was starting to think that maybe my role here is because, I want to create the Artemis Center in real life. So we have a real center where women can go and practice and learn about religious studies. And I thought to myself, maybe that's what she wants from me now. Like maybe raising awareness, maybe going back to some of the old goddesses, maybe some kind of divine feminine community, you know, maybe I'm still on the path. I still have not answered the question yet. But since that time where she kept showing up, I would travel with my mother. She would show up somewhere in a garden somewhere. There'd be a statue of her. I would go travel with my friends. She'd show up somewhere in some way. And so I kind of fell in love with her. Like, at first it was very academic because I think I was afraid to let the spirituality in my life. And also in academia, if you say I'm studying a goddess that I love, they kind of look at you like, well, that's nice, but like, we need some documentary data, you know? I really had to fight for it because I had a couple of people on my committee that were not too impressed. You know, they were like, Artemis, you know? And I had to really convince them that she was worth it. And I remember having gone to Ephesus and coming back with my own pictures. I literally printed them off. I sat in the committee boardroom, and I passed the pictures around, trying to make the connections I was making for my PhD. And I could see like the committee going, "Oh, this might be good," you know, like, so they had seen the connections then. So I had to kind of fight a bit to do it. Then they allowed me, and then I spent 6 years trying to do all the things that allowed me to get that degree. So yeah, sorry, that was a long way of answering your question.
No. We want you to do that. and I think we can just give a little bit of, I don't know if Marianne wants to, but I can give you a little feedback to say that we, you know, I think, I've had similar experiences with a multitude of goddesses, but I believe in what I call the diamond god, which is, because I try and use the terms god and goddess interchangeably. But I like saying the word goddess.
Me too.
Like I prefer 2-syllable words, I guess. But I've come to think that, you know, like a lot of Eastern and Hindu religions who have their thousands of goddesses, but I think they also have an understanding that they all come from the same source.
Agreed.
I call her the diamond god. It's because she is who she is. And what each of us calls her is just another facet of that diamond.
So I guess we can move on to question 2. It's really an honor and a privilege to.
Aw.
You know,
thank you, Marianne.
Yes, I appreciate all that you do, and I enjoy listening to your podcast and have learned quite a bit. You know, with Artemis, I've had some personal experiences myself. So, you know, when Kelly said, you know, referred me to the Goddess Project, and I listened to that podcast, I was like, wow. So yeah, I've had some interactions with her, and she is quite amazing. She really is. So
that's really wonderful. One of my favorite things, actually, that was really unexpected about publishing the book and working and like having more of a social media presence, was that so many people have approached me saying like, yes, you know, I can really connect to her, or I had connected to her at some point. And I thought, like, wow, I love that, because I don't know, I never had that sort of connections with others. And now when I hear that, I'm like, okay, so there's something there, something very powerful there, you know. So I'm very glad that you said that. I have just recently started to allow that experience to happen. So when I was working before, I don't know if it was during the PhD or in my master's, but I was working on Artemis for a long time. I would talk to people about my work, whatever. And I would say to them, you know, this is something that keeps coming for me. It keeps coming for me. And I remember one person saying to me, you know, you should really follow that. You should really go with that. You know, you should really allow that to enter your life. And I kind of ignored it. Like, I stuck to the academia. I was so focused on the academia. I was, to be honest, a little afraid to move outside of, you know, the so-called data collection, research collection. And I got my PhD, I think it was 2016. So only in the last couple of years have I really started opening up to the spiritual aspect of her, and accepting that there's something more than just research. And it's been wonderful, exactly like you say, like there is a presence. But sometimes I think we get so indoctrinated within patriarchy, within academic hierarchy, within trying to be, accepted as a scholar. And I think I got to a point now where I'm like, yeah, I am a scholar and I don't really care. Like, I just want to hang out with women that are just understanding what I'm talking about, So I've been able to get some space from that and allow myself that. And it's been really great. Yeah, it's been really great. Better than ever.
So if I can ask, tell us about when you began your pursuit as like her to be your number one goddess. What prompted that?
So that started, I think, in my master's. And I was raised Catholic. And as a little kid, I was very, very religious and very attached to the Virgin Mary. Yeah. So my parents, we escaped communist Romania. We came to Canada as refugees. And I had a little, what do you say it in, I don't know how you say it in English, but a little image of icon, that's in English, an icon of Mary and the little baby Jesus that I used to have under my pillow. And I was very, very attached to Mary in a very intense way. So when I went to university, I was going to law school. I was planning to be a psychiatrist. I had all these other goals, right, that were non-ancient history related, but I had this passion for religion, and so I took side religious courses, to study different, especially Christianity, and I wanted to like expand on my Catholicism. And what it did is it cracked open my belief system, right? For a long time I struggled because when you study Christianity from an academic perspective, it falls apart, basically, in short. And so my faith in Mary I was just emotionally and intellectually sort of cracked open. And so I kind of pursued that, and then tracing Mary back, I bumped into Artemis, right? Especially at Ephesus. And then I traced that back and bumped into her in Greece. And so then I was like, oh my goodness, this goddess has so many of the qualities that I had been worshiping, let's say, in my heart, but I had all under the umbrella of Mary because it was the only female allowed within Catholicism and in my life. And so I would say that when I went to do my master's, so my PhD is basically how Artemis became Mary, in short. So basically all her qualities and all that kind of were transferred to Mary. And so I think I think when I went to do my master's and I was starting to focus on what I had originally been dedicating my life to, and then working through Artemis, I kind of, I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but I kind of started to believe that Artemis was sort of my original.
The OG?
Yeah, like the original deity, but I had no framework for her under Catholicism. And so everything that I read about Artemis were the things that I was attached to with Mary, but it was even more authentic. And so then once I started my PhD, she was my number one. And she's really been my number one. I have a few friends, like I have one friend that was also very much a colleague that was really into Artemis, and he moved into Kybele. I have other friends that are moved into other goddesses. I like a lot of goddesses, like Medusa would be sort of my second favorite, let's say. But Artemis, I think this is a lifelong relationship. This is a lifelong commitment. This is my boo, right? Like this is I studied many of them, and sometimes I teach many of them, and I talk about them in the Goddess Project, and I think they're wonderful. But like as like the person or the deity in my life, no one has really come close to her,
Yes, absolutely, Joanna.
Yes, we know.
Yeah. And I mean, it's okay. Like, it's okay if you grow. Like, there's a lot of people that grow past one divinity and find others. I think that's the path. But for me, she remains, I don't know, so far, she remains my guide still. Yeah. And I don't know if I told you about the dream that I had. So I had a dream recently. I don't dream very much. But I went to a retreat, a women's retreat, blah, blah, blah. We did a lot of meditation opening. And then when I came back, I had the most vivid dream of like bears. Did I tell you this story, Kelly? Entering.
Bears.
Yeah. So Artemis.
It sounds vaguely familiar. Keep going.
Okay. So like Artemis has like a few animals that are hers. Bears is one of them, and then wolves and dogs and deers. But bears, especially Artemis the bear. And I had a dream, the most vivid dream I've had in years, where bears were coming into my house. And then I would back up and close the door, and bears would break through the door. And I would back up and go into another room, and bears would come in. So I wasn't afraid, but they were like, and I woke up and I knew that it was like her coming for me, saying like, open the flipping door, accept me in your life. What is going on with you? Stop running. And that was fairly recent. So and then I saw her in New York State. So she's still like primary to me. And I guess from a professional perspective, no one else is still looking at her. Like I'm always looking for, is anyone else doing work on Artemis? No. There's a few people in the world that did a few things, but they're sort of, well, they're mostly masculine interpretations of cities and other things, and she's kind of in there. So I guess I also feel a bit like it's my duty, I don't know, my responsibility to make sure that people see how amazing she is and how significant she was. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry.
It does. This is why it's that passion that drives me to do a podcast like this, because I feel like, oh my God, this is excellent news. More and more evidence that yes, it is a feminine divinity, because although logically, I know that the creator of worlds and universes and the Milky Way is a non-physical entity, genderless, you know what I mean? I know all of that logically, but as a human being, to have a spiritual path, I at least need some sort of iconography,
Yes.
And, and I'm a lesbian. So of course, goddess worship works for me, right? A lesbian who has issues with her mother. So I need a mother. So I look to the goddess for that. So I get that. And that really resonates with me. So
I think that's the issue, I think, for a lot of women in maybe the Western patriarchal world. I don't know. But this idea that since you only have one feminine divinity, let's say in Christianity, for me in Catholicism, it was the one thing I could cling to. And I don't know why I was so drawn, to this divinity, to Mary, but I think it echoed a lot of the archetypes and symbols and messages that previous goddesses had. So as a kid, I didn't really know, those things. But as I started to study them more and more, they resonate in a way that you can't explain, right? Because it's an internal experience. And you just know this is right. You're just like, yes, this feels right. I should say that for a few years as an undergrad, I had a real existential crisis in my religion. And for a long time, my mother's still quite religious. We couldn't really have conversations because I was moving away from Christianity. And
therefore closer to hell.
I don't know if I think she worried that I would believe in nothing. I think that was her thing, that I would have the faith, and I guess for a bit I really was all over the place. And now I think when I tell her, I say, Mom, I'm leaning more towards that witchcraft thing that we used to talk about back in the day. I think now she trusts me more, that I think she just wants me to be spiritual. She's accepted that Christianity is not going to happen for me, although I enjoy the stories, and I still teach it as a sort of historic tradition. But in my personal faith, it's not for me. But yeah, it was quite a struggle for a long time. And I tell my students that actually when they come to my class, and I tell them, I said, listen, it's okay if you start to feel, as you learn more, if things start to crack. I've been there. And so I try to share that with them. And sometimes I even say to them, if you're not a person that wants that, you may not be in the right class. Because sometimes, when you know something, you can't unknow it. Right? So be careful, be sure that these are the doors you want to open. I'm not going to be offended if you want to stay within your own comfort zone. So I kind of give them a warning a little bit too, because it does sometimes crumble. Yeah, it often crumbles.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, had you worked with other gods and goddesses?
We have a clarification there.
That's a great question. Let me think. So in my teaching, I would say that I've worked with, well, all the Greek gods and goddesses, and then of course Romans, which is just the flip side. I work with some Egyptian gods like Isis, Horus, Osiris. So I do teach some Egyptology a little bit. I do teach a bit, like, so I have a world religions class in which you have to teach all 5 religions. So I teach a bit of Hinduism, a bit of Sikhism, so some Eastern traditions. And so for those purposes, I do have to research those goddesses and gods. But I would say sort of as publishing something or writing about something or anything like that. No, mostly Greco-Roman, Middle Eastern, because again, a lot of the Greco-Roman goddesses came out of or went into the middle. There was a sort of interaction. But I would say that this, if you ask me what my area of expertise was, it would be the Greco-Roman history. Yeah.
So when you look at working with, like, what does that look like? Like, can you elaborate on that? Is it ritual, worship?
Oh, yes. So I would say yes. So I would say definitely. So ritual is my number one. So ritual, and then kind of like architecture. So I look at temples. So one of my goals is to document all of her temples throughout the world, because I think many of them have been mislabeled and many of them have been not labeled yet. So that's like the architecture space. Rituals for sure, that's sort of primary. So what were the rituals of the goddess, like life rituals, death rituals, war rituals, that kind of stuff. And sometimes I also look at popular culture. So how does this goddess survive today? So because I love film, I love watching TV, and I love comic books and all the nerdy, like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars stuff, whatever. And so I sometimes find her in popular culture. I don't find her in popular culture. And so I would say kind of trying to connect like the past to the present. That would be another way that I work with her.
So when you want to commune with her, like just you and the girl, just hanging out, and your girl.
Oh, that's a good question.
Gory details, please.
I would say that the strongest connection I've ever felt with her was when I went to Crete. So I went to Crete a few times, but the first time was just as a tourist, blah, blah, blah. The second time I went on my own and stayed there for about a month. I went into this cave that was, because I became obsessed with caves, again, because of Artemis.
You know about the cave.
Right? So I went into this cave that it was marked as sort of ancient goddess worship, but I did some research and found out that actually Artemis was worshipped there. I went into this cave, and this cave had like, I don't know, an energy. I don't know how to explain it, because I've been to that cave several times and it's the same energy. I'm almost afraid. Like, so you go down into, so these are deep down caves, right? So you go down into the cave. In the middle of the cave, there's like, it looks like they're statues, but they're not. They're just like, just rock formations, but they look very feminine. Anyways. And in the old days, women used to circle around with candles and praying and doing all these things. But I was there by myself, and there was just something, I don't know if there's a word for it. It was a bit frightening. It was a bit dark. It was really powerful. Yeah. And so part of me was like, run. And the other part of me was like, no, face it. And so I would say that probably the strongest sort of commune with her was there. And I left the cave afterward. I kind of left walking backwards because I was a little bit like, and then ascended back up. And so even though it kind of scared me, the power of that cave, I would go back again and again. I think I've been there 15 times. I actually tried to get my drone to go around it, and it fell. Anyways, that's a longer, sloppier story. I'm terrible at that. And then I would find her more in, so then there's several other caves on that island that belong to her. And I would have these really interesting experiences. I always thought that I would have an experience with her in the forest because she comes sort of out of this forest ideology. And I think when I'm in the forest, I feel at one with nature, whatever divinity that is, you know, with the trees, sometimes even fairies. I think about fairies like in the trees. Um, I don't know if I've ever felt Artemis in the forest. I think more of it like Mother Nature. But these caves, you guys, like I want to go back to Crete. I want to live in Crete so that I can go to these caves on a regular basis and just kind of sit there and, like, I don't know if it's right to say enjoy the fear kind
There's
of
a
thing.
certain
Like,
exhilaration to it.
yes,
Certain, yeah,
right. And I like,
euphoria.
and these are the places where, so even when I put my feet on the earth, you know how you meditate, you put your feet on the earth. I would sit wherever we were in Crete in the backyard, and I would just I would write poetry. It was just like coming through me. Like I would write stories. I did so much writing there. And I thought, like, she's kind of speaking through me. I don't know. There's something powerful. I actually spoke to someone who was like one of these people that did past lives. And she said, you know, I think maybe you lived there in a past life. And because it's just such a powerful connection. And so I would say that's where that happens. But on a regular basis, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I'm at that phase where I'm praying to her yet. I would say that I pray to the divine, and that incorporates, like, I would say, like goddess or mother. There's still a little bit of Catholic guilt in me there. So sometimes, like, the genderization of the divine is weird. So I would say on a daily basis, like in Canada, I'm not sure where, I don't know if I purposely go into a place to connect with her. And that's something I'm really working on. I live like in a city, so I'm not really feeling anything here as far as a spiritual connection. I have trees in my backyard and, you know, but so that's something I'm really missing. I would really love to live, maybe if I live somewhere that was a bit more natural, or like I said, particularly, of course, in Crete. So that's something I'm working on. I don't know how to do that. I don't know. Maybe you guys have advice for that. I don't know. Like, if you don't feel connected to your goddess where you live, like, what do you do? Like,
I call Kelly. I call Kelly, and then she kind of reels me back in and reminds me that I'm the daughter of a queen. So
I love that. Yes.
I was standing in my kitchen and I felt this presence, and I thought my wife was in the kitchen with me. And I look up and I see that my wife is standing like all the way over there by the front door with the dogs.
Wow.
And I went, okay. Like, I just, like, I took him out, and I wasn't afraid. I just thought, okay, moving out of, maybe it's all in my head too. There is definitely something happening here. So that was my super duper, wow, I really feel that. But now I have that, like, when I'm struggling emotionally, I am getting better and better at being able to feel that presence behind me and that hand on my shoulder or that embrace from behind, because for whatever reason she's always behind me.
I see her. Just kidding.
So anyway, that was my experience. Mare?
See, I like tangibility, you know, like that whole mystery of faith and that whole mystery. Like, I needed tangibility. I want to see it. I want to smell it. I want to touch it, taste it, feel it. You know, I need to be alive in all of those senses. So, like, reading stuff from a book, and I love ritual. So I liked the discipline of the Roman Catholic Church. I like the kneeling, the standing, the sitting, the, you know, the reverence. Only for me, it didn't resonate. You know, I had my reasons, and I can't say I suffered from religious trauma. I can't say, you know, the trauma that I suffered in that area was as a result of me denying my true self. So, you know, the first interaction I had was with the Mother God, you know, and I had a dad, I had a father, he died. What I needed was a mother, because my relationship with my mother was, icky. So I started tapping into that and really experiencing a tremendous amount of warmth and peace, but not being able to put my finger on it. Like still coming from a place of, Catholicism and, we're taught there's no such thing as feminine divine. I mean, at least I was. This was the end all be all. And you know what? Not for nothing, but it's not that God's fault.
Right.
It's the interpretation of how all of that was diluted over the centuries.
Very
I'm going to
true.
go down a rabbit hole now.
Mm-hmm.
So, that stuff just didn't work for me anymore. And I was suffering. I really believe that my life path took, because of my spiritual suffering, I just made really just terrible decisions. Because I had no direction, I had no path, I had, no accountability. I had no hope. So when I got in touch with the divine, I didn't tell anybody. So I'm doing this stuff for years under the rug. I got a whole witch room set up. I'm doing all sorts of stuff.
Awesome.
And it came with a lot of shame, guilt, hiding. But I remember doing, just before I got connected with any other pagans, I'm just winging it. I'm doing this stuff. And I casted a circle one night, very first time. And I pulled some energy from the ground that I've never felt before. And I don't even know if I told you this, Kelly, but I never said anything about it ever. It's like, what just happened here? Meanwhile, I know nothing. I'm not connected with people who are, goddess conscious, or, I'm connected to a patriarchal, world. And everything I see, everything I touch, no matter where I go, the reference is always, I'm going off on a whole tangent here. That's why I like the goddess, the girlfriend God. Because I like to use those words interchangeably too, because the word God for me defines truth. It's just a term. And I also, goddess feels a little cool to say that,
Yeah.
You feel a little special, but Kelly and I share the same patron. And that kind of just happened organically. And I was, Kelly, she was like, she brought us together. I'm like, you're just copying me. These kind of things, like I don't share with people. So when this started happening, and I believe that Kelly's experience and spiritual path and as well as mine, we connected at the right place, the right time. I was having this, I can't even say it, existential crisis. And she understood. So not too long after that, I found Ellen of the Waves, and I found her in the trees. I found her on all my hikes. I found her, I could see her, I could taste her, I could feel her. She was real. I'm getting the chills.
Me too. I was thinking
When
that.
the wind blew, and I didn't know this until after. So I didn't know anything about who she was. I would be like, oh, let me read about this. No connection. Kelly knows, I need to experience things, reading is not my jam. And then in hindsight, I'm like, oh, wow, now I know. Now I know when I hear her in the trees. Now I know when I feel her behind me. Kelly has to remind me a lot. I'm like spiritually codependent on Kelly. Really.
I once did this show in Canada. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's called Man Tracker. And it's basically kind of like a reality TV in Canada where a tracker, two girls are dropped in the middle of the forest. They have to get from point A to point B, and a tracker's tracking them and has to catch them. Okay.
It's terrifying.
And so I did that with the part because I played roller derby for a long time. So I did that with one of my teammates. And because you're saying about bears, and one of the things they asked me when we were doing the audition or interview or whatever, they were like, "What are you afraid of, in the woods?" And I was like, "Nothing." And they would be like, "Well, are you afraid of animals?" I was like, "No." "Are you afraid of bugs?" I was like, "No." "Are you afraid of the dark?" I was like, "No." To be honest, the only thing I'm afraid of in the forest is men, right? So I thought for sure I wasn't going to get it because they were looking for something. But anyways, they were looking for maybe somebody that would be terrified. But anyway, so then my friend and I got it. We went through this whole thing. After we did the show, the guide, the tracker, took us back. Like we kind of retraced our footsteps, and there was a grizzly bear for a whole day tracking us. So you could see, like, he was showing us our tracks, and then he was showing the grizzly bear tracks. And he's like, "I don't think you were in danger, but this grizzly bear tracked you for a whole day." And at first I thought, "Oh, that's really creepy." And now I'm thinking, "Oh, that's another bear in my life that, like, so, at that time, I did not put those two things together. I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I was in Alberta going to BC, so it's lots of bears up there." I was like, "Thank God we are alive." But now that you say that, and I'm one of those people that like wild animals come to. So I always used to tease my husband and my family that because we have coyotes in the backyard, one day he's going to come home and there'll be a pack of coyotes because, I'm going to feed them. I mean, I can't have them come to my door and not give them any food.
Kelly attracts squirrels. So.
See?
Yeah, we feed the squirrels.
I had baby skunks this summer in my backyard and I fed them. And so, yeah, so there is that connection. But I think what you're saying, Marianne, is really relatable. Like maybe it's a Catholic thing. Like I relate to a lot of what you say about sort of like kind of pushing forward and pushing back, coming out of that closet a bit, the guilt. Then you're kind of making 2 steps forward. Then you're kind of doubting. You're like, "Am I really seeing this?" I totally relate to that. And having a hard time to connect to source unless you're in like a spiritual space or with someone that's spiritual. So I'm making an effort to connect more to spiritual people, to attend more spiritual retreats, to be around pagans and witches and goddess, because that
pagans and witches, oh my.
Yeah, right? It reminds me, it's so beautiful. And like seeing seeing women just open up those doors and be fearless in their belief. To me, it's just, oh yes, that's right, we can do that, So I totally relate to what you're saying in there. It's been I don't know, maybe it is Catholic guilt or maybe it's all these things, but it's a bit of a back and forth for me too, right? Maybe that's why she keeps knocking on my door and it's like, "Yo, what are you doing? Stop being ridiculous. How many times I have to knock on your door?"
So the questions 3 and 4 that I had written kind of went together. So I'm just going to read them both and then let you run away with that.
Okay.
So question 3 was, when you say that you love her, what does that mean to you? And does she love you back? And what does that look like? And then the next question was, would you consider your connection with Artemis a quote unquote relationship?
Okay. That's maybe a little tough for 10. So when I say that I love her, for me, when I say that, there's a feeling a bit of like duty and loyalty connected to that. So the duty of telling her story and promoting it and promoting it and promoting it and sharing it. A little bit of loyalty in the sense that I don't know why, I just feel like she wants to be the only one, and like the head one, at least, sort of like the top. So I think my love is more like a commitment, if that makes sense. So is it emotional love? I think so, because I haven't been without her in my life for even a day since I started on this path maybe 15 years ago. What was the second part? So when I say, does she love me back? I hope so. started to allow myself to believe that these signs, these dreams, these moments are her trying to connect to me, but I'm still very rigid, right? Like you're talking about offerings and things like that. I haven't even thought, like I'm thinking about that. I'm like, maybe I should be making some offerings to her. I don't even know where to start. But so I feel a bit rigid, but so I feel like she's tried to connect to me over and over in these moments where I'm literally like flabbergasted at the synchronicity. And yet a week, 2 weeks, 3 months later, I'm back in the skeptical zone, you know? So sometimes I do feel a bit like, really? So that's a complicated relationship. I know we have a complicated relationship. Yeah. And I'm starting to work on opening up spiritually, not just, academically or intellectually. So I hope she does. I hope she doesn't give up on me. That's the thing, right? Because I'm a hard, right? So I hope so, but I'm trying my best. And what was the other part? Number 4? What did you say?
Well, I was also going to say the answer to the question was, does she love you back? The answer is yes, just in case you didn't come up with that. The answer is yes. And I believe that. And if you can't believe that, just believe that I believe that.
And I believe
Okay.
that too. So.
Okay.
And Marianne believes that as well.
Okay.
So,
2 against 1.
2 against 1. Okay. Okay.
So the other part of that question was, you essentially already answered that, which was, would you consider your connection with Artemis a quote unquote relationship? Which I think implies that sense of, when I say goddess, I mean like the creator of everything, right?
Yeah.
The creator of us, the creator of the earth, and before the earth, the creator of other planets and the moon and the sun and the stars and all of that. But I have always been a Trinity person, which also appealed to me in Catholicism, right? Marianne and I were just talking about that the other day. Like, what I liked about Catholicism was the ritual, right? The incense and the procession and the lighting of the candles and the altar boys and the
Music,
choir.
singing, yeah.
Yeah. So I did like that part. We ask all our guests. Well, we're going to start with you. After that, we're going to ask all of our guests the following 2 questions. Like, you wouldn't call, if anything, you'd call yourself what? An Artemist?
Artemis.
Yeah, I think I would fall under the pagan witch category, but I would say, maybe I don't know what an Artemis worshiper would be, but so a goddess worshiper and definitely pagan, and witchcraft feels right as well. Or witch, maybe not craft, because I haven't actually done any spells or anything, but witch sort of belief and
right, which also, like modern day witches, all those beliefs have a history too, right?
Yes, right. So that feels right as well.
So current favorite television shows or movie?
Oh, you're killing me with these. My current, now I'm revealing all of my terrible trash TV watching. My current favorite TV. The last show that I finished was Virgin River. Have you guys heard of Virgin River on Netflix? It's like a totally cheesy.
Yes, it's a very cheesy rom-com.
But the place where they live, this Virgin River place, is my dream place. It's in the mountains, in a lake. She lives in the cabin. Everyone's getting along. So I'm obsessed with the plot is okay. Even the main character is okay. But the place, oh my gosh, the visuals, it's stunning. That's the other thing I've been watching is, of course, RuPaul's Drag Race, which is,
oh my gosh, I love that show.
I mean, the all-star season is the best season that's ever seasoned. So I'm obsessed with that a little bit. So those, I guess, are 2. But I also love reality TV. I love really bad reality TV. I think that's the psychologist in me. So that's, I watch a lot of TV, guys. I know academics are not supposed to watch TV, but I do. I watch a lot. I watch a lot of TV.
I watch a shameful amount of television. I don't understand how you watch that much TV with all the other things that you do.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Like, do you sleep?
I do. Too. I don't know. I
Like,
watch it.
okay.
Yeah, like sometimes I will stop doing something and I'll say, no, now I need to veg, so I'm just gonna watch some easy TV. Like, yeah. And I love like murder mysteries. So I have watched on Netflix, they have international murder mysteries, like Italian, French, blah, blah, blah series. Somebody's always getting murdered in some forest or something. I'm obsessed with watching detective stories. Yeah. Yeah.
I myself watch the occasional Scandinavian noir. Right?
Mhm.
And finally, if you had to pick one song
Oh God.
as a theme song for the soundtrack of your life, what would it be?
The soundtrack of my life. I can't believe you're making me admit this. There's a ton, of course. There's a ton for all of us. But I think if I'm being honest, the first track that came to mind when you said that was like "We Can't Stop" by Miley Cyrus. I'm a huge Miley Cyrus fan. Okay.
Wow.
My daughter, when she was small, she loved Hannah Montana. And one of our favorite memories is when she was 15, I took her to see the Miley concert exactly when Miley was bucking out wild. It was the Bangers tour. And it was incredible. And one of the things that I really love about Miley as a woman is that she's just like, she doesn't give a shit.
Uninhibited.
She just doesn't get, and you know, to be like, I was a 20-year-old, we all were a 22-year-old, and I look at her and I think, wow, to be in the public eye, to be so judged, to have all the problems that we all did, and just keep going. So I admire that. Like, I see that generation as powerful, you know, like I think to myself, man, I should have been like that when I was 22. And I'm not saying I was some wallflower, but I was definitely much more a product of my society. I guess maybe that was the times, you know, don't be too loud, don't be too whatever, you know, those kinds of things. So I really admire her. And then, yeah, my daughter and I, she's sort of been I guess one of our things where we connect on. But I gotta tell you, like, just gotta be honest, like some of her music, I'm like, yes, like We Can't Stop, on my own, doing shit by myself. I don't need you in my life. I'm like, yes. So it feels a bit empowering whenever I'm feeling all like, and she says, she has that line where she's like, it's my mouth, I'll say what I want to. And I just find that like, yes, you know. So I would say that is one. I don't know, there's probably a ton of them, but that is one that every time I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, my mouth, and I'll say it. So I have to, you know, you have to remind yourself. I think having been a product of so many structures in which you have to watch what you say and watch who you are and watch how you act, and so I think that's a me. That probably says more about me than anything else. So that's a good question about the damn song, but it's also like very revealing. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.